He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is The Alex Marlow Show.
There's one thing you know about The Alex Marlow Show. You've got range. A lot of range, and you're going to see on full display today. We start off Senator Joni Ernst, one of the most powerful Republicans in the U.S. Senate. Did about 20 minutes with her. I get a taste of what she's going to do after she retires. She's self-imposing a 2-term limit for herself in the Senate. I could handle a 3rd term. I think that'd be pretty good. I think a 3-term limit would be good for the Senate. But she's moving on with her life, and she gives us some details on what she might do. And then we speak to her about the government shutdown. She gives us the latest, the strategy, what it could take for the Democrats to want to reopen the government, and where we go from here, date lines, all that stuff. So a full breakdown, pretty comprehensive. Before we get into it with the one and only George Santos, the most glamorous former Republican congressman / convict, and he's out, he's free, and he's got a lot of super interesting stuff to say. You might not agree with all of what he says. You might not believe all of what he says, but you will be fascinated. I guarantee you that. That's today's show. Let's get into it with Senator Ernst. All right, Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa is back on the program. Senator, it's always nice to talk to you. Since you were here last time, you announced that you're going to be moving on with your life, which is kind of shocking. I have to admit, I'm going to miss you in the Senate. I think you've got a unique voice in the Senate. I think you're someone who can talk to both the MAGA wing and the establishment wing pretty effectively, which there's not that many people who can do that. And I always like that your portfolio includes cutting waste in the government, which is a nice legacy you're going to have. But can I get some insight into your thinking about what could be more important than being a U.S. Senator?
Well, Alex, there are many things that actually are more important than being a United States Senator, especially when you're a United States Senator that really does believe that there is great talent coming up behind us. I, of course, served in the United States military, and I knew that every 2 to 3 years I was going to be rotating through different positions, and so I should be mentoring people to follow behind me and fill my shoes. When I first came into the U.S. Senate, I had made a commitment to my constituents that I would serve 2 terms.
Wow.
And, there are many, many senators out there that have made that pledge as well. And this is why so many people don't necessarily trust members of Congress, as they say one thing and then they end up doing another. So, one, I'm going to adhere to that self-imposed term limit. But also, when I mentioned there are things more important than being a senator, it is important that I am a good daughter and I have aging parents that need a little more care. And I also have a beautiful grandson and would love to spend time helping my daughter, who is an active duty Army officer. So there are just some things that are very important to me, and family is very important to me. And I wish more people understood that it took all of those people helping me get to where I am today. Now it is my turn to help them as they need help, whether it's in their older years or whether it's the beginning of new life.
That's a fantastic answer, which I wasn't expecting a great answer to that. That was a really good answer. And but you couldn't impose a 3-term limit. I mean, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. It's way better than what we're doing now.
I'm breaking my promise. I know.
We've been running jokes on the show all year about how, like Dick Durbin retiring at 80 years old. That's like peak athletic performance for Democrats now. Is like 80-year-olds. I mean, that's like the prime of your youth. So it's an interesting thing because it's such a powerful spot, and it seems like people really like the job. So it is still surprising, but I think you're right. I think your seat is going to go to someone good, and I think that's got to be a big comfort. And
Absolutely.
then. There is something just remarkable about being with the young children. I've got the young children running around my house now, and it is for, I won't say all the grandparents, but I would say some of the grandparents. It's the life highlight to date so far. So anyway, well, best of luck, and hopefully whatever you do next for work, you won't be strangers. You'll be filling me in on what goes on.
I will. I
But
will.
there's a lot going on now, and we got the shutdown going, and I want to start fundamental and then get more granular for the wonkier people in the
Mhm,
audience. But let's just
mhm,
start with, what do you think
mm.
caused this shutdown? Why are we here?
Well, Chuck Schumer and his desire not to be opposed by the very far left of his party in any future primary. And of course, everyone's going to say AOC. And I would agree. We have this branch of the Democratic Party out there that is so far to the left that it makes Chuck Schumer look like this mild mannered centrist. And so he's trying to ward off any threat from that branch of his party. And in the meantime, though, he's holding members of his own Democratic Senate conference hostage.
Mm,
There are many, many of my colleagues that really want to get this over. They want to open the federal government. So I would say it's not at all about the expiring expanded COVID Obamacare subsidies. That's not really the issue. The issue is they're just not Looney Tunes enough for the far left. And so this is one way they can show their commitment to all those cuckoo, cuckoo, far left Democratic members.
yeah. So I think you're right on this. And so one of the things I'm trying to piece together is, what specifically are they asking from the Republicans that would be a condition that would meet their demands sufficiently so that they could vote to open the government?
Well, honestly, more of the centrist members, those that we would consider kind of normal Democratic members, they're not asking for too much. They do want to have negotiations, and whether those negotiations are now or after the government opens, they just want to have those negotiations, which is pretty reasonable. And I think we can have those negotiations. And the president has said that. John Thune has said that. Speaker Johnson has said that. So that's very normal. That's very mainstream. But again, it's the far left members and Chuck Schumer that are really hijacking this entire shutdown scenario. So the demands are not that excessive, and there are a lot of Democrats right now. Well, I won't say a lot. Those members that I normally work with that are just like, we just want to get this over. They really are feeling pressure from their constituencies, as they should.
Yeah.
And comments to the effect, and many of the Democrats have actually said this, but the American families suffering, the suffering is their only leverage. And that's
Yeah.
pretty darn pathetic.
It is interesting. It really is like a blackmail thing that they're basically going to force certain people to suffer and then try to win a media war against Republicans to blame you guys, which is really tough to do considering you're the ones who are voting to open the government and they're the ones who aren't.
Right.
And yet that's exactly what they're attempting. So let's talk specifically about which groups you feel like are feeling the pinch right now and will
Yeah.
be in subsequent days and weeks ahead. Why don't we start with service members and we'll go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my daughter is an active duty service member. Her husband is also an active duty service member. So there's a two-member family that would not be receiving pay if President Donald Trump hadn't cobbled together the pennies to pay our service members. So they are the ones that, of course, are out there defending the nation. We have service members that are deployed around the globe, and yet they are the first ones that always get targeted by these shutdowns with no pay. Thankfully, the president did put together a package of different funds he found out at the Department of Defense that he was able to make that first payroll. We know we had a donor that gave $130 million to pay the troops. We should not have donors, stepping up. I mean, I'm glad they
Yes,
did.
you're
But for
right.
heaven's sakes, we're asking for donations now to fund our national defense. I mean, this is ludicrous. So we got through the first pay period. This second pay period, evidently, they have found additional funds, and they are raiding these funds. These are funds that are supposed to go elsewhere, but in order to pay our troops, the folks out at the DoD are putting packages together to make sure they get paid. There's going to be a lot of cleanup after we get the federal government open to make sure we're replenishing those funds that were raided. So those service members are always that first target. Now, we have staff members that are not getting paid. Everyone in the federal, they're not getting paid. We have non-essential workers that are at home. They will receive back pay, but they're not working. So there's 750,000 non-essential government employees that are at home. They're not required to come to work. They're not required to work, but they will receive back pay to the tune of $400 million every single work day, which means at this point today, we are $8.8 billion into a payment from our taxpayers to people who have not been working. No productivity for the federal government from these 750,000 workers, which means when they come back into their jobs, hypothetically, then there's work they'll have to do to, get things up and going again in their offices. Perhaps they'll start drawing overtime. Who knows, additional expense. But it's $8.8 billion that we have spent for absolutely nothing.
Yeah. And it also reminds you of, if you have all these non-essential workers who are still getting paid, even though they're not working, it just shows you also that there's just been this huge government jobs program where there's all these jobs that are not essential. I'm not saying that all not essential workers are created equal, but it just does make you scratch your head, because I feel like I got to work 3 jobs to get where I want to go in life, and my wife works a job, and then we're like, wait a minute, there's people who are non-essential workers getting a paycheck and they're being asked to stay home, and it's just very foreign to people who don't work in the government that this is possible.
Yes, it is. And I do agree that they should get back pay because they are employed by the federal government.
Sure.
It's not their fault that they have been
they want to
laid
work
off or furloughed. But we need to really scrutinize this. And I do this through my squeal work, my waste and fraud work. I have scrutinized so many different departments and the excess of employees and workspace that they have. I mean, all of these issues have been a target. We're at a point in time where it's not really these employees' fault. I would agree they need to be back paid. But moving forward, we need to identify then, out of all of these non-essential workers, how many of them do we really need to keep on the federal government payroll? So, that's a conversation for another day. But going back to others that are going to be hurt through this shutdown, obviously we are very, very short on funds for women, infants, and children. This is a program that aids new moms and their babies. We do have SNAP benefits. I think we have over probably half of our states that have stopped giving out SNAP benefits. November 1st is a really big deadline for a lot of these states. In Iowa, we have about roughly 370,000 Iowans that are on SNAP benefits. They will no longer receive those benefits. So we will have families and individuals that will not be able to put food on their table.
So I want to talk SNAP because SNAP, Senator, this is one of the most interesting things, because we all know the program is wildly abused, that there's too many foreigners on it, that there's families with illegal aliens in it that are benefiting from it. We all know that it's over-indexes for unhealthy foods. But all of that's not stuff that we solve right now. What we solve right now is that some people legitimately are on the program, and
absolutely,
and they're going to have this taken away because Chuck Schumer's afraid about primaries. Like, that's not that's not acceptable. But so what do we do?
Yeah, exactly. And this is where we have a number of ideas that have been laid out on the table. And because we really need to get through this government shutdown, a number of the Democrats quietly visiting with all of us on the side out of Chuck Schumer's hearing are trying to come up with plans to move forward. And I would say the Appropriations Committee has done really wonderful work. We have our appropriations bills done out of the Appropriations Committee in the United States Senate. Susan Collins is the chair of Appropriations. She has done a great job wrangling all of the members and getting those bills done. So we really need to continue pushing those through the United States Senate. If we can get them done, a lot of what we call pre-conferencing has been going on with all of the different appropriations, say the defense appropriations, THUD, all of these different groups have been talking, deciding how to move these bills through Congress. So that requires members of the Senate and Congress or of the House to come together and decide on what can get passed and signed into law by the president. So what I anticipate will happen is we have the Department of Defense bill. We have a few other smaller government bills that are all packaged together. And I anticipate that John Thune would try and move some of these packaged bills together in what would be a minibus type situation, but clean, focused only on those appropriations bills, not a bunch of extra policy stuff piled in, just focusing on those clean appropriations bills that were passed bipartisan out of the Appropriations Committee. If we can get a big portion of these bills done and over the finish line here in the Senate, we certainly could have the House participation as well, get these done. That would fund probably over 70% of the government right there just by getting those bills done. And then we can wrangle over the next 30%. So that's one idea. Another idea is setting a time certain for a healthcare summit down at the White House, bringing together the four corners, bringing together those experts that we have here in the Senate and the House to talk about those Obamacare subsidies. Yeah, and it needs to be a very hard discussion because there is so much fraud within that program. It can no longer continue as it is. But what I do want to remind all of your listeners, Alex, is that we're just talking about the expiring subsidies, the expanded COVID subsidies. Not all of the subsidies are going away. These were the subsidies that were expanded because of COVID. And I just want to remind people yet once again that those expiring, expanded COVID subsidies, that was the Democrats' plan. They are the ones that set the sunset, the go-away date for these subsidies, and now they are arguing over them. So it's really kind of two-faced of the Democrats to be arguing, we need to, it's Republicans allowing them to expire. Well, for heaven's sakes, it was the Democrats that actually set the expiration date.
So what are the moves that we got that can be made here? Because it does feel like the Democrats are losing the messaging war. I think the polling shows that. But I do think they feel like they always message better on healthcare. And despite what you just said, that they feel like as Obamacare subsidies start running out, that they can maybe gain leverage there. So what are the various scenarios? And do you have a prediction of how this thing ends?
Well, I think we are starting to see some cracks in the Democratic conference here in the Senate. And so I am really hopeful, and I even hate to say it out loud, but I'm really hopeful the next week we can get the government open again. I don't want to jinx anything. My hope is that we actually do move appropriations bills because that's regular order. That's what we should be doing anyway. I mean, that's our job. So, we have tried this before, and Democrats have resisted conferencing on those appropriations bills and so forth. But I think, given the circumstances, they want a way out, and this is a way out. It still doesn't solve their Obamacare subsidy crisis that they manufactured. So I do think we have to have a discussion about those Obamacare subsidies. And again, if it truly was the Affordable Care Act, why do we require such extensive government subsidies? It was meant to be a program where those individuals that participated in Obamacare didn't need subsidies because the plans would be reasonable and they would be affordable for everyday American that didn't have access to health insurance. And that has not been the case. And to the actual opposite, President Obama had said, Obamacare is going to save every American family $2,500 a year. We haven't seen that. The costs have actually skyrocketed.
Yes.
And those subsidies go straight into the health insurers' pockets. It doesn't go to those families. And so what do? They jack up the rates. They get the subsidies, the health insurers do. And it doesn't do anybody any good. We're still seeing horrible health outcomes here in the United States of America. And what we have found, we have many studies out there that have been presented to us that show that health insurers, in some cases, I'm not going to say all cases, but in some cases, insurance agents registered Americans without their knowledge, knowing that, okay, well, here's going to be a zero contribution to the premium individual, but we're going to suck in all these subsidies coming directly from the federal government. So most often, those Americans didn't even know they were registered for a health insurance plan. So there is so much fraud and waste within this program. And you know what? The Democrats have just not wanted to do anything about it. It's just easier to funnel the money to illegal immigrants that are here in the country. It's easier to allow the health insurers to pocket these huge sums coming from subsidies than to actually push back on them and demand that they show, maybe audit all of those records and show that these Americans actually know they're signed up for these plans. So it's a huge scheme. It's a scam. And again, with all the squeal work I do, this is really concerning to me that the Democrats would just want to continue with spending this type of money on plans people don't even know they have.
Senator, I know you got to run, but tell me, what do you think is the key to getting just a few of those Democrats to break and to vote to open the government?
Well, I think hearing from their constituents is number one. And hopefully they are the type of people that will take those calls to heart and understand that, yes, American families are suffering. I'm part of that problem. I need to be part of the solution. And I do think that there are a number of very reasonable Democratic colleagues that are willing to say enough's enough. We want to get through this shutdown. We need to do the right thing by the American people and put the American people over politics. So I think we'll get to that point, but they need to hear from their constituents. They need to hear the challenges that our service members are facing, that those families on SNAP are facing. Even in my home state of Iowa, I have farmers who can't make farm payments right now because of difficulties in accessing the different farm programs that are out there. So I think everyone in every community is going to feel some level of impact from this government shutdown. And certainly the traveling public, we didn't really talk much about air traffic controllers.
Sure.
But certainly those that are traveling, if they are going by air, they are going to feel the impact as well.
When do you think that really starts? It feels like, I know Newark had some shutdown, so that's a big deal.
Yes.
It's a huge airport, so it feels like that's about to start.
I think we're at that tipping point right now.
Interesting. Senator, you've come back anytime, and that includes after retirement. And you can go to @send Joni Ernst on X to follow her, ernst.senate.gov for her website. Keep up the good work, and don't be a stranger as always. And thanks for the great updates.
Yes. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. I don't think it was 5 minutes after George Santos' sentence got commuted that I had reached out to Molly Marlow, my sister, who's books the show for me, and said, we need to talk to George Santos. This is essential. We got to get this done. And he's here now. George, congratulations on getting released. You have an unbelievable story. And I want to get to some of how you got to prison, but I think the thing that I'm most interested in, and I haven't heard you get to talk about enough, is what it was like on the inside, particularly that the reports are that you were basically in solitary confinement for who knows what reason, and it seemed to be totally abusive. I don't know how that happens, but just the floor is yours.
Well, Alex, it's great to be with you. And a shout out to Molly, who's been relentless and such a queen to work with.
Good.
I just wanted to say it's been it's been absolutely humbling to be back home. This is day 12, and it's been just a whirlwind. But 84 days, and nearly of that time, I was in solitary confinement. FCI Ferreton is run like something I've never seen before. And trust me, I've seen government dysfunction, but I have to say, they really take the cherry on top, from a decrepit, corrupt warden to an absolute decaying facility. It is such a disgrace that that is the facility that, people are supposed to go be rehabilitated at. And then on top of it, if you criticize them, well, they become very vindictive. And I saw that firsthand in how I was treated. And imagine that, Alex, if they can do it to me, imagine what they can do to other people who don't have the platform, who don't have the privilege and connections I have.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because I do think about how it's good to get the bad guys locked up, particularly the violent ones. And I feel like a lot of the cities where I've lived in, violent crime in particular, feels like there's a rush to get people back on the streets. But that doesn't mean that the prisons are generally an embarrassment and a disgrace in this country. And the fact that we have so many people that are incarcerated is not a good thing. And we don't really get to talk about that stuff a lot, because we just see all the violent criminals who get out, and then that usurps the whole conversation. But it would be nice to talk about, are the facilities good? Because once you incarcerate people, I thought about this a lot in college, where I was on a travel baseball team where we would play the Folsom prison inmates. And I was like, wow, should we really be playing the inmates? Like, absolutely you should, because they got to do something. So they're better off playing baseball than doing something else. But there's a humanity element to this that we don't really have time for in a lot of our discussions.
Well, Alex, I was one of those people who, when I would hear we need prison reform, I would scream, who cares? They're just a bunch of criminals, right? And now by being on the other side of that conversation, it's been so it's a rude awakening. First of all, prison's supposed to be for rehabilitation, to give people a second chance to atone and to really change and do better. But when you put people and you put them under dire, inhumane circumstances and forms of imprisonment, you're not going to find rehabilitation efforts that are going to be productive. You're really just creating angry people who will come out. And that is why when they come out, recidivism is so high. We have about approximately, on national average, of a 30% recidivism rate on non-violent offenders, that when they come out of prison, their second offense is now violent. That's because of the way they're treated. So not only we're taking non-violent offenders into prison and putting them under very harsh conditions, not rehabilitating them, but now we're turning them into violent offenders. And violent crime seems to be up the wazoo in our country because of the way we treat prisoners. I'll put it this way. I was incarcerated with a 20-year-old man from Baltimore who is in prison because of literally what I think most district attorneys in America would consider petty drug charges. Now, he's in prison for approximately, I think it's like $60,000 worth of weed, which is not even the bare minimum threshold for federal charges, which is usually 70. But they wanted to throw this kid in prison. So they throw this kid in prison instead of giving him community service and penalties. Now he's in prison with actual criminals and actual drug dealers. He has a 36-month sentence. He's going to be out of there, give or take, in 20 months. And guess what? He's going to go out there and become a real drug dealer now, a real violent one with guns and with actual moving real heavy drugs. Why? Because he's going to have guys on the inside who are going to use him for that. And that's what we're doing in our system. We're creating a violent turnaround of prisoners. And that's why we see so much violence, and people focus on the violent aspect of it because they're ignoring the rehabilitation process.
It's fascinating. Do you have any quick solutions, things that we could implement right away that you think would be helpful?
Absolutely. First of all, we need to actually do FSA on not just on the books, but on the record. We have it on paper that these people are taking college courses and that they're taking this. None of that happens in reality. We have it on the books that they're supposed to take trade classes and learn how to be carpenters and drywall hangers. None of that is happening. The facility I went to actually advertises that they have a service dog training program and that they have a CDL program. Neither program has existed. The dog training program hasn't existed in 10 years, but they still advertise it as it does exist on the books. So a lot of inmates look forward to these things so that they can create a better life. So we really need just to put what's on the books in practice. And the second thing is we need to take the amount of discretion that middle management has in case wardens and really rein it in, because wardens make arbitrary decisions to, for instance, the warden in my facility made a decision to buy an 85-inch flat screen TV at the cost of thousands of dollars for her office in lieu of cleaning the heating vent ducts before they were turned on for the season. So these are kind of issues that create anger. Like an inmate like myself, I find out that she is opting for a massive TV for her office, but she's going to turn on the heater without cleaning the ducts onto me so I can breathe whatever mites and dust and whatever gut are in that duct system, and she doesn't care. Right? That creates anger, that generates resentment, that leads to people becoming mentally unstable. So these are things that we need to change. We need to control the power that wardens have. We need to have more oversight. We need to do oversight visits that are not announced, just show up, because if you announce it, they turn it spick and spam in a heartbeat. I saw it happen twice. And then on top of that, we really need to reconsider how we're incarcerating people. There was a 72-year-old man at Ferriton for tax evasion there, in which he paid full restitution and $1 million on top of restitution in fines. Why didn't we just give the man 3,000 hours of community service and some probation and leave him out producing? But instead, the 72-year-old man was given a 9-year arbitrary sentence by a judge who literally said that she was going to punish him. That's not what the justice system is for. Not punishing, not retribution, not reprisal. It's for rehabilitation. We need to go back to that type of approach in justice.
So let me ask you about your time there. What was day-to-day like, and include how you ended up in solitary, and tell me what we need to know about that.
First of all, I show up to prison day 2. It's miserable for me. I'm cut out from information, and for most of you who know me, I'm very connected. Information really is a big part of my life. So I show up. I try to get myself busy to avoid the fact that I am now cut off from the world. I have no social media. My news sources are now not available to me because I get my news sources from a lot of alternative media, not mainstream media. And so that's number one, difficult, right? I have a very hard time adapting. I've lost my freedom. But I joined the kitchen staff and I just immerse myself in the kitchen from 7:30 in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon, pretty much 7 days a week, even though I was only required to do it 3.5 days a week. So pick up 3 full shifts and a half a shift to make my hours. I just didn't have anything better to do there. There's nothing to do. So I did that. And then 33 days into my incarceration, there was an investigation done by an outlet, Project Veritas, that unveiled that a former discredited source who had already been investigated for insane lambastic claims of an assassination plot against me in 2023, now came up with another conspiracy to kill me. Now, they went to my attorney. My attorney, highly impressed, and reached out to the facility for precaution, which is his obligation and duty, and informed them of what was going on. You know, like maybe you want to be more cautious and up protection. The warden decides to put me under protective custody. Now, protective custody doesn't necessarily mean you're punished, but under the gazeful eyes of Warden Lynn Kelly, I was punished. She put me in the special housing unit in solitary confinement in a 6x9 cell by myself, 24/7, with only access to 3 showers a week, with no access to actual clean clothes, using recycled underwear where everybody shared underwears. Essentially, you wore it, put it to the wash, and you got whatever you got back. No real hygiene, no real personal hygiene options. And you were given food that my dogs would probably have a hard time even accepting. No access. I asked for a Bible. I asked for a rosary. Those were both denied officially.
Wait a minute. Hold on. You can get a Bible? That's
nope.
Then what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to just go crazy? Or what are you allowed to read? What are you allowed to do at all?
Well, they let you pick out 3 books every Saturday. Now, the books are, for the most part, we're talking about 4th to 8th grade reading level books. So I mean, I was pounding through books, like a book a day, a book and a half a day. So by 2 days after that, I had no more books left to read. And when I would ask, "Hey, can I change out for other books?" They say, "No, we only do books on Saturday." Although the cart with the books was sitting literally in front of my cell, the COs would not give me extra books or let me trade out books. So it was a game of almost torture. The way that they approach it's so arbitrary. Like it made no sense. I could only communicate with my family once every 30 days for a 15-minute call. And if they went to see me, which they did twice, but were denied once under some nonsense, which means they drove 3.5 hours each way to South Jersey for nothing. And the second time they did, they put me in shackles, a belly chain, my hands cuffed, my feet cuffed behind plexiglass as if I was a dangerous murderer in order to visit with my family. I wasn't able to groom myself. My beard was out of control. They don't let us groom ourselves. So it's just not an environment meant to house people, let alone animals. I believe if you treated animals the way I was treated, I believe it would qualify for animal cruelty and it would raise up to federal charges against a person. And she would gaslight me by saying this was for my protection.
So this is just so mind blowing. Were you able to get the word out to the rest of the world at all during this time?
So when I first got into the shoe, I was able to buy stamps and a legal notepad, and I started immediately writing my experiences and mailing it out to my family. Now, little did I know was that by the next week, when I would order commissary, and the available options were very limited, from stamps to legal pads and envelopes. I ordered stamps, and because they did not like what was coming out in the media that I had already written, because my husband was giving it over to the South Shore Press, a newspaper in which I'm a columnist for, um, and I was openly documenting it. They didn't sell me stamps, so they tried to silence me. If it wasn't for a CO who saw what was doing and disagreed with it, a very good man that works there, and for his protection, obviously, I won't say his name. He's the one who managed to slip me 10 stamps from another inmate, because they understood my plight. So I continued to write, with the help of inmates and COs who were against what the warden was doing and her vindictive nature. But that's the only reason I was able to stay communicating with the outside world. It was through my letters, in which they would also withhold the delivery of them by up to 2 weeks. That was kind of the average delivery date from when I would write it. So it's a process meant to break you, silence you, and to destroy you. And all this because I was hypercritical of the warden, the moment I got to the prison, and I just didn't stop being critical because it's always been my brand to buck the system and to call out what I believe is wrong, and I'm going to continue to be that way. So, to my detriment.
So, did you have friends there? Did you have anyone famous?
So I wouldn't say famous, but there was two guys with lots of notoriety, which were both Bob Menendez's co-defendants. So I guess the gold bar guys were in the same facility as I was. But I to say I made friends would be an of overstretch. I did become very friendly with some people. And I also happened to be in the same facility as a former campaign employee of mine who kind of got swept up by the DOJ for refusing to cooperate against me, because he said there's nothing I can say that would hurt George. You would want me to lie. And they wanted him to subscribe to some narrative that was just not accurate. And he refused to. So then they threw him in prison as well. So long story short, no. And the 41 days I was in solitary confinement, My options of talking to people was, the guy in the cell next to me was a transgender murderer who had murdered another transgender inmate. And the guy on the opposite side of my cell, in the other cell, had murdered 4 or 5 people and was also a convicted child molester. So that's literally where they put me and said it was for my protection. So, I mean, under the gazeful eyes and watch of Warden Lynn Kelly, she calls protective custody something that is for you, but in reality, you're there with the same people who are there for disciplinary custody, who kill, who steal, who bring in contraband, who bring in drugs. And she gave me the same exact treatment, which is absolute contradiction to what the BOP standards and manual procedures are. So this was, again, another form of her being vindictive.
So, George, this will be a shock to you, but not everyone in the audience is going to take everything you're saying at face value. So, what do you think we should do to try to corroborate some of this stuff and try to get, because this is all horrific, if your account is accurate. And so, what do we do? Like, what should we do to hold people to account?
Well, that's fantastic. Well, I'm actually going to be with BOP leadership tomorrow, and the reason is I don't need to. I understand some people are not going to want to take me at face value, and that's fine. But the beauty of it is it's all documented, and I also happen to have two whistleblowers who are employees of the facility who experienced it with me, and vehemently rejected and rebuked what the warden was doing, and they refused to understand or conform to what she was doing to me per se. So I'm lucky that I'm not alone on this one. I have actual corrections officers who are willing to go out there and put their face out there and rebuke the behavior of the facility warden. So that for me is enough. And I guess people, if you don't believe me, you don't want to believe me. I understand I gave you no reason in the past to do so, but this isn't something I'm taking lightly to exaggerate or even make a minimal misrepresentation on. This is a big passion for me to actually bring change, because I believe that there's no reason, shape, or form that we should be close to 250,000 people incarcerated in the federal prison system. We should really strive to rehabilitate these people and also create a deterrence in low-income communities and inner cities to avoid allowing our youth to get to the place of going to prison. So this is a passion project for me. I'm humbled that the president has literally opened the door and allowed me to become this kind of prison reformist and working with his administration on it.
I didn't know this is where the conversation would go, but we're actually kindred spirits in this regard. And I have almost no bandwidth I dedicate to it at Breitbart just because there's other stuff that's pressing. But I do think the prisons are a disgrace in this country, and we need to, it's not a good way. It does not speak well of our society if this is what's going on. So thank you, George, for that. I want to talk about the commutation. Were you surprised by this? I know I've heard you got to talk about this in other outlets, but I wanted for my audience to hear, what do you think made the president do it?
You know what? It's a lot of people struggle with what I've been saying, but I'm just going to be very straightforward with you. The day before the commutation, the visiting priest came into the facility. I had just been released a couple of days earlier from the SHU and solitary after my attorney went to absolute bat for me to get me out of the SHU, along with a lot of folks in the DOJ and the BOP who it was inexplicable why the warden was trying to keep me there longer after the investigation into the assassination attempt was debunked. And the FBI had written it off, and the U.S. attorney had declined a prosecution. So it really took a village to move me out of SHU, but I did get moved out of SHU. She actually tried to even put me on a variable management, which means she can move up my custody, although I had no custody points. That's why I was at a camp. She tried to put me in a low, which is an actual prison with actual dangerous prisoners, right? So I go I go to the camp. I go to mass on Thursday. The priest before mass offers me to go to confession. I said, "You do confession?" I was like super excited because I had taken to praying on my own terms without a Bible or no rosary. But you talk to God in whichever way you can. And I go to confession. I spend a significant amount of time with the priest in confession. We do mass. I take communion after many, many years of not taking communion. And I felt at peace. I woke up the very next day. I felt really at peace. Like, I have the strength to do this. I like, you accept God back into your life. It's a really, really sobering experience. And that same day after, all this happens, President Trump commutes my sentence. And I find out through the TV. I wasn't even aware. And I equate it to divine intervention. God believed I deserved the second chance. I squared away my quarrels with him. And the moment I put myself back into God's light, I think it made a difference, and I'm forever grateful. I mean, above all God, but President Trump for his grace and his clemency and his absolute belief in second chances and redemption. So that's what I really believe it was.
So I love that he mentioned Denang Dick Blumenthal saying that if this guy got away with lying about war service, then it's the George Santos shouldn't be punished the way he's been punished. I just thought that was just so awesome. It was just one of the most awesome True Social posts that I think I ever read, which is really great that he had that excuse to talk about that. But I want to talk about where you go from here, because you weren't pardoned, correct? It was a commutation, and you pled guilty to things, and you have a reputation, but you're a young guy, and I know that you're very high profile. What do you want to do with the rest of your time on this earth?
I've dedicated the rest of the time of this earth, obviously taking care of my family, because I've learned one thing: wealth isn't measured in money and material things. It's really measured in your family, and the simplest things on earth. That's really real wealth. But other than that, I just really want to dedicate a great time of my life to doing prison reform, to helping underprivileged communities, and to taking away the options that are dished out at these kids in, call it Chicago, Detroit, Philly, New York, that they believe they have to go in the line of crime. I want to work with them to fix the root cause of our prison issues and population, but then also work to be a reformist, to give people second chances, change the way we do certain kind of custodies, change the penal code to not overcrowd prison with people who can be rehabilitated through community custody, right? There's nothing more humiliating and sobering than taking a wealthy man and putting him to go clean up streets for the whole community to see, while you're wearing a vest of saying community custody, community service individual, right? And then making them pay heavy financial fines. I mean, I think that's a start. I think we should reserve prison for actual dangerous people, people who are a threat to society, people who are a threat to the United States, people who are a threat to others on bodily harm. But the justice system has expanded its scope to defending the American people and the United States from enemies, to now just really being weaponized against every single person. And they've overstepped a lot of local and state jurisdictionalities that would be protected otherwise in the 10th Amendment. So I think I just want to do good on that front. I think there's a lot of opportunity and not a lot of people willing to do it. And I'm willing to do it. I think the best thing I can do is to make President Trump and the American people not regret giving me a second chance, and show them what good can come from a second chance. And there's nothing more than I wish is to deliver and work hard. The one thing you can say about me, Alex, I might be very high profile. I might be infamous in some ways, but I am a workhorse. I don't back away, and I always deliver. Whether you like it or not, I'll always deliver.
It's high energy. So do you believe that you were mistreated because of your politics?
I believe I was the only member of Congress to go to prison for the type of charges that I was charged with, instead of just getting an FEC violation and paying a fine because I was a Republican who flipped the seat. Yes. Do I regret what I did and my poor choices? Yes, they're not mistakes. A mistake is you literally accidentally going a little too far with your car when you're backing up and hitting the car behind you. A poor choice is what I did. I chose to make bad decisions in lieu of, sticking to my values and to the foundational values that I was given from my parents. My parents taught me better than what I did. And I brought great shame to my family. And for that's going to haunt me for the rest of my life. But other than that, I really believe that, I can bring some good out of this, and I will work really hard to do so.
Do you feel like you're a different person than when you committed your crimes?
84 days was quite literally sobering enough to understand that everything I did was so silly and it was so silly in the first place. I didn't need to do them. It came from a place of insecurity. It came from a place of greed and ambition. And I'm totally embarrassed, totally repentant. I would do it again. I mean, if I got a chance to do it all over again, it'd be so different. And I've learned one valuable lesson is the truth is always best, no matter how hurtful it is. And being forthcoming will always be your best friend. And I think that is a valuable lesson, because you lose something that you don't understand how powerful it is until you lose it, which is freedom.
George Santos, absolutely fascinating. I told you I'd get you out of here right around now, and I do want you to come back. So I want to make good on that. Is there anything you're plugging right now where people can go check stuff out?
You know what? Just check out my Twitter, and if you're looking for a smile on your face for the holidays, cameo at George Santos, and you will get one hell of a good video.
That has got to be one of the hottest cameo items for a holiday. Yeah, definitely. Recommend. We'll endorse that. All right, George. Thank you for doing this, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Thank you, Alex. Great to be with you and the guys over at Breitbart.
Thank you. It means a lot. Thanks to producer Misty. Molly Marlowe does the booking. John Cassio, who pulls clips, and all of you in the Breitbart and Alex Marlowe audience. Tell 10,000 friends and family members about the show. Talk to you next time.